critically analyzing global affairs. The Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Well, hello and a very warm welcome back to the Muckrakers with me, Andrew Eborn. And here on the Muckrakers, we pledge to continue tackling the most pressing and controversial news issues of our time. Our mission is to provide more light and less heat in our unwavering quest to uncover the truth and to inform, educate and entertain, all with dignity and respect. And it's vital that we don't just ask the questions, but question the answers. And today we're going to focus on the very sensitive issue of Guantanamo Military Base in Cuba and the US track record in human rights abuse. Today on the Muckrakers, it's made up of myself, Andrew Eborn, Martin Jay, Dr. George Szamuely, and a very special guest, Ayşegül Ekinci. Welcome to you both, all three of you.
Good to be here.
We get used to the. We get used to the. I don't. Ekinci is wonderful. I've been practicing.
I think you messed everybody's name up, Andrew.
Apart from yours, it's got to go. Even my own. So let me tell you about Ayşegül Ekinci. She's an award-winning and highly respected war zone journalist, TV presenter, and author of the brilliant book "I Have So Much to Tell You." She's known for exclusive news reporting from Guantanamo Military Base in Cuba in 2002, and is the only female journalist to have ever been accepted by the US military to report from the base. Ayşegül is also an expert at conducting hundreds of exclusive interviews with a galaxy of stars from Hollywood to the mega stars from business and beyond. Martin Jay, what can I tell you about him? He's an award-winning journalist, editor of Margrebe.org and Leventis.me, which featured the Muckrakers this week. Hurrah! I'm delighted to see that. His career spanned over 30 years, which has seen him work in over 50 countries for a host of big media titles. My favourite bit, however, is what he always says on his X page, where he proudly proclaims he's been fired by all of the media giants, and CNN called him a good journalist, but a pain in the backside. And finally, delighted to welcome back Dr. George Szamuely, who's a senior research fellow at Global Policy Institute London. He's written for innumerable publications and is author of the brilliant book, Bombs for Peace, NATO's Humanitarian War on Yugoslavia. Now, I want to look, first of all, at the very sensitive topic of Guantanamo Bay, where in a corner of the world where the horizon meets uncertainty lies a place that has become a symbol of both intense scrutiny and relentless controversy. Guantanamo Bay, a name that evokes the complexity of justice and the shadows of the war on terror. For over 2 decades, this remote base has been at the epicenter of a global debate over security, human rights, and the rule of law. High-stake military tribunals confront the echoes of one of the most devastating attacks in history. And if we look at the history of Guantanamo Bay, it was US acquired from Cuba in 1903, I think it was, under a lease agreement, establishing it as a naval base. During the Cold War, the base was used for various military intelligence purposes, including as a detention facility for suspected communist agents. But most importantly, in January 2002, the US established a detention camp at Guantanamo Bay to house detainees who were captured during the so-called War on Terror. It was intended for individual suspects, individuals for those suspected of terrorism. Now, I want to start with you, Ayşegül. You've been to Guantanamo. You were the first and only woman journalist to go there. How did that come about?
Well, Andrew, first of all, thank you very much. It was great, opening to explain about my career. Well, I have been the UK head for CNN Turkey, Channel D, which is the mainstream Turkish media, and also Hürriyet for 17 years. And as you said, I'm a, war zone expert. Apart from Guantanamo, I've been to many places like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq. If you start with Guantanamo, if you remember, if I take you back to 9/11, right? The world, actually met this very chaotic time. And after a year, 2002, 598 men were picked up from different airports, different places, detainees, and they were taken to America's only military base in Cuba, Guantanamo. And obviously, if you remember, there was a picture in the Times. I think that the picture was quite epic. The reason for that, we can see the detainees in orange, uniforms. And, there was like, some cover on their heads. And the picture was quite appalling. So when I saw the picture, I was very young. I was like, I was at the time doing my PhD, and I was working for Hürriyet. I said to myself, I really want to go there. And to tell you the truth, sometimes as a journalist, it is, we have to dream big, right? And at the time, it wasn't very easy for me to dream big, because I was only want to be journalist at the time. But I won't give the details to you, right? And, I kind of check out all my networks and everything. And after 3 months, all right, I was accepted to Guantanamo Navy Base. But obviously, I have a very strong career in different, fields as well. Anyway, when I went to Guantanamo Navy Base from Dominique, I had a senior photographer with me as well. Obviously, I couldn't believe in my eyes. It was a very, very difficult time for me to, later when I think about it, it is quite difficult to digest as well, because I was there for 10 days initially. And, you see this, you don't see, first of all, you wouldn't see the detainees, right? Because they were living in a very small kind of cells, almost like, very, very, I would say they wouldn't even move in the cells. And these people, I don't think that they would know where they are, because, if you think about like, anybody from, like Middle East, or, the thing is like, most of these people were from Middle East or from Muslim background, right? So they wouldn't know where Cuba is or where Guantanamo is. So when you think about it, it's like quite a big, chaos, right? And when I was talking to commander, like, how you question these people, these detainees, and I find out later that, these people were on antidepressants, on many medicine, which, it doesn't make any sense. So if you are on antidepressants, on medicine, how can you give right answers to questions? So it's whole thing was quite, problematic. And when you think about human rights, it's like, no way, honestly. So if you remember when Obama was elected, I remember the second date he was in office, he kind of announced that he was going to close down Guantanamo Navy Base within a year, which obviously he didn't. And then, there's so many question marks about, Guantanamo Navy Base. So then, right now, if we look at the history after so many years, 2024, still, to my knowledge, there are 30 detainees. But when I think about, like, the initial 598 detainees, what happened to these people? Do we know about them? Yeah. Do we know them?
You make some excellent points. I do want to bring in George and Martin on this, and we'll come back to a bit more of your experiences. What's your take on all of this, George?
Well, Guantanamo was opened as part of the global war on terror that George Bush announced in the aftermath of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The problem was always that what exactly was the purpose of this? Were you trying to find out about who was behind 9/11? Is that, or were you just trying to find out about all terrorist activities, potential terrorist activities, future terrorist activities? And then what? So it was a very strange enterprise from the beginning, because it didn't seem to have any particular purpose. The other aspect of it, and this has to be emphasized over and over again, is that the people who were responsible for the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the various jihadis, had been sponsored and promoted and funded by the U.S. government, because up until the attacks on New York and Washington, D.C., they had been doing sterling work as far as the United States was concerned. Obviously, their roots were in Afghanistan when they were fighting against the Soviet Union during the 1980s, but then they were transferred to other parts of the world and continued to do the work that the United States was very happy for them to do. So they were involved in Chechnya because it was giving the Russians all sorts of headaches. Then they were, of course, involved in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And again, they were there to give the Serbs an awful lot of headaches. I mean, in that case, it was literally headaches. They were cutting off heads of Serbs and parading them around. And then, of course, they were also involved in Kosovo. So, it was precisely because of this attack, that on the United States, that suddenly the U.S. reversed itself and suddenly declared them to be enemies. But they're only enemies insofar as they targeted the United States. I mean, as long as you're targeting powers and peoples that the United States wanted targeted, then they were doing good work. So that's why it was always very odd as to what purpose Guantanamo was supposed to serve. What are you going to do with these people? I mean, you can torture them. Torture them with a view to what? Is this? You're just going to find out about plots? Well, what happens when there are no plots to find out about? You're going to prevent them from carrying out terrorist activities in the future. Well, how are you going to do that? I mean, the moment you release them, what's to stop them going back to doing things that you don't want them to do? So it was a very odd enterprise. But as we've just heard, it's still ongoing. I mean, even though there are only 30 detainees there, and I think there were at its height, I don't know when, there was maybe 700. I can't remember what the exact number was at its height. There's still 30 there. And again, you have to ask, with a view to what? What is it? Because if these people had committed crimes, then prosecute them. But if they haven't, if you're just afraid that they might commit crimes, then you can't just simply hold people incarcerated in perpetuity because of what they might do upon release.
You make some very valid points. Torture, indefinite detention without trial, and obviously lack of due process. We're going to get to Martin's take on this, but we're going to go first of all for some short messages.
The challenges our planet's animals are facing sometimes feel a bit heavy.
The animals haven't eaten in a day, 2 days, they haven't drank anything, they're cold, they're dehydrated.
As soon as we started our descent, everywhere I could see was mud, just absolutely mud.
The country has been in prolonged drought for so long, it was like a tinderbox waiting to go up.
Okay, very heavy. Each of us wants to be part of the solution, and we can be. Remember that there's good happening right now. At home.
All right, we were able to get into your unit, and we have all 4 of your cats. So,
okay.
And around the world. For any animal in any disaster. So let's focus on that, right? Be part of the solution, one rescue at a time. Search ifa.org/disaster ready.
The Light is Britain's far-right conspiracy theory paper spreading hate and vicious lies. No, that's what the BBC say. The Light is the only national newspaper bringing you the real news and informed opinion on what's really going on today. You can subscribe, order copies, submit articles, and read back issues on our website, thelightpaper.co.uk, and see for yourself why the establishment are so worried about the uncensored truth getting out to people every month. The Light Paper. Not for right, just right so far. Thelightpaper.co.uk.
Tracking global corruption and threats that undermine our security. This is the Muckrakers on today's News Talk, TNT.
Do I get it right?
You do get it right.
You're on here.
Oh, hey, we're off.
You're on here.
Oh, we're on air. Fantastic. Well, there we go. We're having a behind the scenes about pronunciation of names. Apparently, I called Martin J, Martin Day, and Ayşegül. I got the wrong syllables right. But I did win the prize because Dr. George Szamuely I got right, which is probably the most difficult one of all. You're here on the Muckrakers, and you probably heard Murray in the background saying you're on air, which is always useful to know. We're looking at the very serious subject of Guantanamo Bay and looking at a deep dive into history and the people who are there and the treatment that they've had, including torture, indefinite detention without trial, and lack of due process. Martin, I was going to come to you. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think Ayşegül will probably correct us, but I think there's something like maybe 6 or 7 prosecutions in total. And I think now very, very low numbers of people who are actually still there. George is absolutely right. I mean, it really is an odd institution that I think people are really scratching their heads and wondering what was it about in the first place, and now what do we do with it? One of the beefs I have as a foreign correspondent who's worked in the Middle East for many years is trying to explain to editors of national newspapers in London that we, as foreign governments, engage terrorist groups and, in many cases, pay terrorist groups. Most people don't believe me, but George made the point very good. I mean, a lot of these terrorists around the world were on the CIA payroll, and they were not necessarily paid with cash. There are all sorts of ways you can get around using public money to pay terrorists. But most of these terrorists, you have to go all the way back to 1989, when the Afghanistan war ended, and the jihadists that we employed, that we paid, to fight on our side, basically ended up in Peshawar, which is really a godforsaken place close to the Afghanistan border on the Pakistan side. I've been there. And we're just sitting around drinking coffee all day and asking the CIA handlers, what do we do now? We've won one war for you, and that's really was the problem that we had with these terrorists, is we didn't really know what to do with them all the time. And I think some of them fell through the net. Some of them, they were idle and perhaps dangerous. And probably maybe the smartest thing to do was to put them in Guantanamo Bay. If you look at when the Afghan war started in '79, a lot of Middle Eastern countries, in particular Egypt, but even Morocco, where I am now, Algeria, and a few other countries, took advantage of the war and knew what the Americans wanted to do. They knew the Americans were looking for jihadists, and many of these countries emptied their jails of all their Salafist extremists and all their known terrorists, sent them to Afghanistan with the express intention of not letting them come back to their own countries. And many of them, surprise, surprise, went to UK when the war was over, UK and France. So Guantanamo is one of these odd institutions which has rounded up and collected a few of them floating around. George is absolutely correct to say that, the intelligence gathering rationale behind it, arresting people who have got links to terrorist groups or are terrorists themselves. I don't think everybody in Guantanamo was, technically speaking, a terrorist. Some of them were just linked to terrorists through cell phones. The first thing that intelligence agencies do when a car bomb goes off, if it's triggered by a cell phone, they look for the SIM card and they piece it together and try and find the network of who was connected to that bomber. And so it's a very, very odd organization. Let me just quote you something from the Atlantic magazine. I wish I'd written this, Andrew. Just listen to this. This is a fine line to sum up Guantanamo Day. Guantanamo is where you send a mass murderer if you want him to die of old age, while those prosecuting him drown in paperwork. I wish I'd written that. Really, I really, really wish I'd written that. That's a brilliant summary of really what this organization is about now. And I'd really like to ask Ayşegül if she has this, if she speaks to many Americans and how she interprets how Americans see Guantanamo, because I think a lot of Americans don't even know about it, or actually know about it, but don't really know what a travesty of international law, a farce of human rights the Guantanamo is.
Well, yes, actually, Martin, you made some very interesting points, and especially I didn't know that you were in Peshawar. After being in Guantanamo, it was 2007, some years later, Again, I was the only female journalist who accompanied late Benazir Bhutto after, 8 years of exile. She was going back to Pakistan to bring democracy to Pakistan. If you remember those times, I feel that, Benazir Bhutto, she kind of knew she was going to get assassinated. So when we went there, before we went there, actually, Taliban made an announcement to Benazir Bhutto, saying that if you come to Pakistan, we will welcome you with cocktail of bombs. Anyway, obviously the politics are. I feel that international politics are kind of like a show, right? I will tell you why later. So obviously 2 months later, Benazir Bhutto got assassinated in Waziristan, not Waziristan, border of Waziristan, that area. And then I stayed in Pakistan for another 3 months, and I went to Akotakata Madrasa. Akotakata Madrasa is, like you explained, one of the biggest madrasas in the world. I think the biggest madrasa in the world, who literally train jihadists, right? And at the time, again, I couldn't believe it, because there were students, they called jihadist students, age of 5 till 40. So if you see this man between 5 and 40, and they live in a community in this madrasa, and all the things that, I've seen in this madrasa is you can see on my YouTube, and made the headlines in Hurriyet. So, yes, what happened after 9/11, I think that, some of these jihadists, because, obviously these people are being funded by different organizations, so what do we do with them? It is
Exactly.
they were traveling everywhere in the world. So I feel that, also, I will come to your question, but I want to give some more points from my knowledge. I think also establishments in everywhere, could be Europe, in the Middle East, anywhere, they use some symbols, right? And I think that Guantanamo was one of these symbols, right? It is like hidden message to the outer world. And then you can read many layers underneath as a journalist, but an average person wouldn't understand. So again, coming back to your question about Americans, obviously I talked to many people after being in Guantanamo, and after seeing so many things in Guantanamo, and they wouldn't know, they weren't, even interested, because, when people go through their daily life, unless they're interested in international news, foreign news, they don't know. Yeah. So I think it is in a way that, it is a little bit, ignorance of this day and age. We don't know how much going on in the world. We don't know how much, unless, it makes to the news, right? News everywhere, like in Turkey, UK, America. So I think that, when you think about this, again, I really feel that, Guantanamo is one of the symbols, right? If we read underneath this, there's so many answers. There's so many hidden answers. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it's interesting. Just to follow up on what you were saying there, Dr. Ekinci, get to get your surname right as well. You're talking about a lot of people don't know. You're right, they don't know. And we hear about reports of waterboarding and other harsh interrogation techniques emerging. You have been there. What did you see?
Well, actually, you mean in Guantanamo?
Yes.
Yes. Obviously, as I said, you can't, talk to detainees. You can't, you weren't, at the time, you can't see detainees. You can only see the cells from the distance, which is because I've been live reporting, then we have some